Welcome to the very first episode of GorillaCast. My name is Ami Rubinstein. I'm a partner at Gorilla Capital and will be the host of the show. Today, our first guest is one of Gorilla Capital's founding partners, Risto Rautakorpi. Welcome, Risto.
Thank you.
Our goal today is to talk about starting with why. So if we dive directly into the deep end, why are we doing this? What's the origin story of GorillaCast?
Well, in short, it is to educate and inform the aspiring early-stage founders. But to give a more concrete example of what is behind that is that we've been doing this for over 10 years. And over the years, we have had discussions with multiple founders who at the end of the conversation have said that, oh, shit, I wish I had heard about this years ago. Because had they known this kind of an alternative exists, they could have acted differently and avoided many painful mistakes. It is such a waste that they have missed the opportunity and they have wasted years. And us spreading the gospel one by one to each individual listener just isn't effective enough. So now our mission is that no founder would ever need to say that again, so that they have been delivered the information early in time. And another concrete example of what we hope to achieve with this is that once upon a time a founder from our Fund 1 who had a relatively successful startup, they managed to raise ample funding and by any conventional measures they seemed successful, but ultimately he had to file for bankruptcy. But he was a brave guy, he did a post-mortem himself. And there was a sentence in his post-mortem that should have been the title of the whole thing, which said that if someone gave the $1 million now, this time I would know how to use it. That's another big waste that should be avoided. The learning should come before you have access to that level of money. And we want to give people understanding of what you need to learn and how to learn so that you are prepared to spend the money wisely when the time comes to have it.
I think that's a very good foundation to build on. And if we start by saying that it's important for us to be clear on why we are doing the cast, I think it's similarly very important for any startup to have a fairly strong reason why they are doing things. I've witnessed you discuss with a lot of the founders, and you always want to understand why are they doing this. Where is this company coming from? Why is that relevant to you?
Well, I'm a big believer in this start with why philosophy, created and promoted by Simon Sinek in his book and many presentations, which is, well, let's not get into the details of what's behind that. People who are keen on that, I recommend you listen or read the Start With Why book, or at least look at the TED Talk video. But the why is the ultimate goal and the ultimate motivation for people who want to achieve something. And a startup, by definition, is a learning project where you adjust based on what you have learned. So where you start today is one thing, where you end up one day might be something completely different as you learn and adjust along the way. But what stays constant is your why. And if we understand the founder's why, it helps us to predict what the future will bring. And it also tells about the character and the nature, so what kind of why they have. It can vary, because if someone's why is that I want to be rich, okay, enough of a discussion, we will not be an investor for your case.
You mentioned startup being a learning project or a process, and if we dig a little bit deeper into that topic, I know that every company has its own unique path, but it seems that there are certain similarities when you look at the kind of lifespan of any company and especially an early stage startup company. How do you usually break down that journey?
Well, the overall journey can be divided into two main chapters, where it's pre-product market fit and post-product market fit. It's completely different worlds. But to give some broader context, a startup is not a big company in the small scale. It's a completely different animal which fights with completely different type of challenges, of which you have no experience in the corporate world. And for instance, the job related to finding product market fit is something that corporates don't have to do. But the original founder 100 years ago or something may have faced that issue, but as of today, most people are there just to execute on orders someone else has given to them. But yeah, finding product market fit is our main focus area because we are an early stage investor. So we know quite a bit about that. And then post PMF, it's more of an execution thing. But the first part of the journey, you could say that you need to learn, you need to find answers to questions where no existing answers are available. Once you have learned enough, you gradually start executing based on your learnings. And so eventually there's a gradual shift that you start from not knowing anything and there's nothing to execute on. You just need to learn and soak in as much as you can. But eventually you have learned enough so that there's something to start executing on. You never know, you never know everything. So the learning never stops as such. But when you have enough existing answers, then there's something to start building the real business on.
I think you mentioned learning as a key for startup founders, but I think in what we do, it's just as important, if not more important. You mentioned Simon Sinek and his views on starting with why. One of the other things that we usually build on is Howard Love's book, The Startup JCurve. Mm-hmm. I think it's been a very good way for us internally to discuss the progress of startups, and when we're talking with the founders, it's a good playing ground for both sides to understand how we're looking at things. So would you like to say a couple of things about
Sure.
the basic principles of the JCurve and why it is relevant for us?
Yeah, well, the JCurve book is the Bible of our church, so we refer to that every day multiple times. Well, a startup, in a way, is like the school kid of business. And you need to treat a school kid very different from an adult. But in Finland, when a kid goes to school at the age of 7, your next 9 to 12 to 15 years are precisely spelled out in advance. There's the curriculum which says that what you will be taught and what you're supposed to learn at each stage. And then you go through the whole education system one level at a time. And everyone goes through the same process. Some people learn faster, some less fast, but everyone goes through the same stuff and in the same order. You cannot skip classes. If you do that at your peril, because at some point you need to come back, and then it takes more than twice the effort to cover what was left behind. The Startup JCurve actually defines the curriculum for startup. Because just like for school kid, for startups, the evolution goes through certain predefined stages. And if you understand that journey, and most importantly, you understand your position on that learning curve, it helps greatly to have focus on what matters at any given time.
I think one of the other things that we've really witnessed is that when you're clear on what you need to focus on now, it gives you permission as a founder not to worry about certain things you don't need to worry about at that stage, which once again helps you put your resources where they need to be.
Well, yeah, the number one reason why startups fail is premature scaling. This is not opinion, this is a proven fact. And what's behind that is that people do things which are wrong. They are not categorically wrong, but they're just wrong given the stage where they are at. So again, using the school kid example, if you're a second grader, you are not supposed to even try doing something meant for nine graders. If you do that, first of all, it's a very frustrating experience because you have no chance of surviving with that. So can even result in a burnout if you set the bar for yourself too high, that, I'm supposed to do this and I'm not able to, I'm burnout if I fail, or as I feel like I'm failing. So that's one thing. The other thing is that all the time you spend doing that stuff which you're not supposed to do is time away from what you really should be working on, which may result in you not even getting to the next class and you have to repeat already at an early stage. So understanding where you are on the learning curve and understand what is relevant given where you are now is really important in having focus because this is about learning and there's so much you need to learn about. Your bandwidth isn't enough to learn about everything at the same time. So you need to cut it into pieces and put them in certain order that right now it's enough. I focus on this. And the rest will come later when I get there.
You mentioned premature scaling as the number one reasons for why startups fail. And if I look at, for example, Startup Genome's research, it shows that 70% of startup fail-ups are related to, at least to a certain extent, to premature scaling. And I think it's a fairly recognized fact, but it still keeps on happening all the time. Why do you think that is?
Well, several things. Probably one is just in the human nature, because any kid who is under 18 would like to be 18 so that they could get the driver's license and be allowed to enter a bar. So any early stage founder would like to have a real business so that they could do stuff meant for real business owners, hire salespeople, think about marketing campaigns and do budgets based on real revenues and all that. Who wouldn't? So you kind of, in your mind, you jump way ahead of where you actually are. So that's one thing. Often, actually, the blame goes to investors, because most startup investors, and they may not even recognize it themselves in all cases, but they would want to fund scaling, even if the company is nowhere near of being ready to scale. But when you are given money in order to scale, you try to scale, even if you're not ready for that. And that results in premature scaling. But yeah, I guess there are many laws of the nature that draw in that direction, which is why you need to consciously fight against it and remind yourself about where you are. Actually, we have at Gorilla Capital, we have this reporting routine called MVIR, Minimum Viable Investor Report. And just like an army exercise, in every monthly report, we ask them to write down, what stage are you at? Just to remind them that, I'm only on the second or third or whatever grade. I'm supposed to do only stuff meant for that level, which is it's supposed to help them because it allows them to narrow down the focus that, I don't need to worry about that yet. I can postpone that, which gives me more bandwidth to focus on the stuff that matters today.
Staying on this topic for a while, as you mentioned, sometimes it's driven by investors, and the more money you raise, the more quickly you need to scale and so forth. And I think if we look at the startup scene, it seems that we're celebrating very much large funding rounds and kind of the more money you are able to raise seems to be a metric for a better company that you're building. But is it really so?
Not in my mind, and actually the data doesn't support it either. So there's no correlation between the amount of money you raised and the eventual success. But there is a proven correlation between the amount of money raised and the risk of failure. So the more money you raise, the more likely you are to fail because you start playing with bigger and bigger fire. And yeah, celebrating the funding rounds and all that is in a way kind of a vanity metric. At least I appreciate way more the first month when you are cash flow positive based on real revenues. That's a real achievement. That's something sustainable. That's something to build on. A funding round is actually just living off on someone else's money. So you shouldn't do that unless you really, really have to. So it's not something to celebrate. It's rather, I would feel a bit, well, I don't say you should feel ashamed, because in certain situations it's perfectly justifiable, but much rather focus on the customer revenue than raising funding rounds. And that results in kind of a vanity race. Now, okay, it's behind us because we've seen all this in the results. But a few years back, especially in the US, there was a race among founders that who can get the highest paper valuation on the funding round. And now we know the result of that, because most of those companies, well, they probably don't even exist today. Or if so, the valuation today is something completely different. But yeah, having focus on the next funding round is, in a way, if I'm a bit nasty, it's like a Ponzi scheme. Because the scheme stays alive as long as there's an even bigger fool who will put the next round of money in. But at some point, the music will stop, and the one holding the bag at that moment will be the victim.
All right. Still talking about some of the mistakes that early stage companies often make. We mentioned scaling too early. as one of those. I think one of the pet peeves that we talk about a lot and statistics show is a big indicator as well is companies failing to understand why customers buy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that's seen a lot in the market, but how do you see that point?
Well, that is the core, of course. So, no need to debate. It's self-evident. But for years already, if people have asked me to summarize the recipe for startup success succinctly, I've been quoting Steve Blank. This is a sentence I just picked up from one of his books. And it says that the difference between winning startups and those who lose is that the winners understand why customers buy. The losers never do. And anyone who has real experience from selling says, yep, that's the thing. And it sounds easy. Into practice, it's not. So that's ultimately all that matters. So actually, that's the thing that we focus on the most, because if you have that, if you do understand why customers buy, the rest is just work. Yeah, well, you can mess up things in a multitude of ways, so nothing is trivial as such. Nothing happens automatically. But that is the single most important thing. If you have that, the rest can be done. If not by you, by someone else. But if you don't have that, nothing will save you.
You mentioned that in theory it sounds pretty easy, but as we've seen with a lot of companies, it might be one of the most difficult things for you to get right. So what are the building blocks for understanding why customers buy?
Well, you need to have a curious mind. You do need to have the burn to get inside the customer's head to understand why they do what they do, what's behind that. And to be able to do that, you need to have a very humble attitude, and you need to put your own ego aside. You need to forget what you want or want it to. I want to be the biggest in Nordic or something. Well, yeah, nice, fine. That might be the outcome. But if you set that as the goal, guaranteed you will fail. Your number one goal should be to satisfy your customer. And you can do that if you understand what really is behind them. And then here's a recent insight I just learned in the last couple of weeks. I've been listening to a book called Sell More Faster, and that gave the 3 W's rule. So they kind of drill deeper into this understanding why customers buy piece, because why they buy can even be further divided into 3 subcategories. Why do you think they buy? Why do they say themselves they buy? Why do they really buy? And the third one is the one that matters. And that is sometimes a subconscious one. But for you to master this topic, you need to know better than the customer themselves what they're going to do next and what will trigger them to buy. But that requires deep insight into the customer's world. You need to be able to see the world through their eyes, understand what's driving them, what's motivating them, what are they rewarded for, how does the world work from their perspective. But that's the fascinating piece. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it is one of the difficult things for early stage companies oftentimes to find the courage and find the right way of approaching customers and really to dig deep into understanding what the customer is willing to pay for, rather than just focusing on trying to sell what it is that you're doing or presenting. And I think for the kind of Finnish engineering mind, it often seems to be difficult to accept the customer feedback as it is. And oftentimes ignoring the feedback can lead to some wrong conclusions.
You definitely should not go there with the mindset of selling. But you first need to earn the right to speak, because you first need to win the customer's trust so that they're even willing to talk to you. Or willing to share the stuff that you really want to know about. So that is earned. That's not a given. So you need to demonstrate enough potential value for them to care to spend the time with you. And then you need to be genuinely interested and curious. And this is a cliche that all sales guys have heard, that people have one mouth, 2 ears, so you're supposed to listen more than you talk. But this is all about that. You initially you need to talk a bit to get the customer talking. And after that, you just need to listen attentively. But that also requires the ability to understand and the willingness to dig deep, because you may not pick up the right stuff. You may hear, but you were not listening. You missed the nuggets. And that's what oftentimes is the difference between the winners and losers. because, well, the stereotypical sales guy who can sell sand to sheikhs and the used car flogger, they just, it's power selling. So they manipulate, they can get you to buy once, but that's not based on understanding your real needs. It's more like a power selling tactic. So it's definitely not about that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you should be there with the serious mind, with an intent to sell. Because if you go there as an academia research person, you don't get to the real truth. So this needs to be kind of a real sales situation where you are actually trying to get them to eventually buy. Otherwise, you don't uncover the things that are hindering you from getting there.
Yeah, and I think if we look at the value equation of how customers make buying decisions, for a startup, I think the barrier is even higher than for an established company, because the element of risk is always a part of the customer decision-making process. And when you're an early company, when you don't have a lot of references and proof, the risk plays a major role in the buying decision. So you need to be able to show even more value than selling for an established brand.
Yeah, and especially if you're trying to sell to two big customers too early. There's no shortcut there, because the bigger the customer, the higher the bar for them to buy from an unknown, unproven vendor. And that is a trap some startups sometimes fall into, that they dream of, if I only get this one big customer, then all my problems are solved. They alone will make us cash flow positive, yada, yada, yada. But that never happens. The big corporations will never be your first customers. They might be keen to talk to you because they think could learn something from you. They might get you to do them some free favors, and maybe they even try to be nice to you so that they help you to learn stuff, which might be taken as some kind of a purchase signal. Because oftentimes it may sound a bit similar, but it's not the purchase intent. So that could be an endless resource drain. You might be stuck in that loop for years. So be real. Start with customers which are closer to your size. They are not that picky. They are willing to take more risk. And for them, the risk is not that big, because they might not be that certain about their existence next year or year after that either. So start with them, and then start building your track, and then one step at a time, aim for the bigger clients. Because this David versus Goliath situation is just a mission impossible, basically.
Good. If we move the discussion a little bit towards the founders and founding teams, in our discussion already, you've highlighted a number of important factors for the founding teams to consider. The first one was being very clear on why you're doing what you're doing. The other thing was that you need to have this learning mindset throughout the process. And the third one that you've highlighted is this need for curious mind in trying to understand what your customers want and what they are willing to pay for. Are there some additional things that you look for in strong founders and founding teams?
Well, what is kind of a meta level thing behind those things already mentioned is that you need to be humble. You need to have strong enough self-confidence that you can accept to be wrong, so that you can accept what the customers tell you at face value, rather than have a selective hearing and only pick up signals that support your initial assumptions, which easily happens. But that's very misleading, and that can be very dangerous. So you need to be humble. You definitely must not be complacent. So if we smell any kind of cockiness, complacency, all that's the end of discussion, because that prevents learning. With that kind of mindset, you will not learn the stuff that eventually matters.
Yeah. And when talking about startup as a journey, what role does resilience play for founders and founding teams?
A lot, because the journey is always longer than you think. Actually, yesterday evening, I was attending a nice event. One of our Fund 1 companies, which has become very successful now, had their 10-year anniversary. 10-year anniversary. 10 years is a long time. So a 10-year-old kid, hey, it's in the 4th grade and something, so it's not a baby anymore. But 10 years for a startup goes fast. So during that, there will be all kind of business seasons. There will be down cycles, up cycles, all kind of weather, whatever, and you need to survive them all. So this is a long journey. This is a marathon. And when you are running a marathon, there will be painful moments when you would like to quit, but you just have to push forward. And then the euphoria wins again, and then it feels nice and all that. But yeah, resilience, the attitude that I'm not going to let this go. I'm not going to give up. Well, you shouldn't be hard-headed. Sometimes giving up might be the right thing, but you shouldn't do that too easily. There needs to be right reasons for doing that. So this is not supposed to be easy. If it were, everybody would do it and everybody would succeed. But yeah, resilience is definitely one of the things that because when the sun is shining and there's free beer, everybody's laughing and having a good time. But when you are out in the sea, in a sailboat, the mast is broken, there's water coming in through all holes and all, and the boat is capsized and all that, that's a real test of whether you can pull it off. And there will be situations like that on your journey, guaranteed.
As an investor, are there ways for you to try and kind of measure the curiosity, the resilience, and things like this with the founders before you make the investment decision? Or
well, you bet we try. We try our very best, and hopefully we get better every day. Mistakes happen because yes, we are an early stage investor, so by definition we invest in people. The business case at its best is still very early stage, and if the founder is any good, there will be many pivots on the way. So what the business will eventually look like should be very different from what it is today. So there's no point in over-analyzing the business case as it is today. So we focus on the people. And yes, we do try to sense the traits in the character as described. But there's no meter you could just plug in and then see the reading. It's experience-based pattern matching, and then just getting the feel, and yeah, that is the beauty, but also the beast in our business. That this is ultimately very, very subjective, and you just have to trust your gut, and then feel like, yep, that person I believe can pull it off, and then with someone else, no. But for people not to have wrong perceptions about that. Vast majority of the cases we say no to is not because we think the founder is not good. It's just not structurally compatible with our strategy. So it's just not a match, period. So we don't know whether it's good or bad or anything. It's just not a match with what we are looking for.
That's a very good point, and I think one that is worth making to founders as well. That just as much as investors are trying to gauge if the company is a good match for the investor, I think it's very important for the founders to look at what type of investor would be good for them in the short and the long term. Yeah, it's not just about getting money. It's about a lot more.
No, actually, we put a lot of weight on what we call philosophical alignment. And in a way, you could compare this for a spouse selection process, because in both cases, the asset at stake is not what is visible today. The asset at stake is a dream of happiness in the future. So in a way, you are buying an option, and you need to trust your gut to some extent, because after you have laid all the facts, you still don't, because no one knows what the future will bring. So you just need to trust the gut that, well, no matter what the future will bring with it, together we will be stronger than separately. And that's how we feel. And with the founders, we decide to back. We trust their judgment. We believe that come hell or high water, they know what to do. They can make the right calls. And they can ask for advice in time, not after the thing has already happened.
Very good. I think kind of winding down our discussion today, one topic that I still want to touch upon, even though we've said that it's a long journey. When you found a company, it always takes longer than you expect, and it requires resilience. But at the end of the day, usually companies are aiming for some sort of an exit event. And when we talk about exits, the exit market, we don't want founders to be too focused on it early, but it's good to also consider it. So tell me a little bit about the exit market, what it looks like today, and why does that matter even in an early stage?
Well, just first on a more abstract perspective, if you as a founder take venture money, you do promise an exit. So after that, that does not need to be discussed. But that doesn't work for all founders, and that's perfectly fine. They just need to manage without venture capital. Being completely revenue funded is perfectly fine. Or if you build a lifestyle business, you should not even think of raising venture money. So this is not for all businesses. This is for a certain type of businesses. But yeah, at the time you approach a venture investor, you promise an exit. So that's kind of not a discussion topic after that. That should be a given. Right now, what I read from recent Talouselämä article, for the past 2 years, the exit market has been at its lowest since 1998, at least volume-wise, and also, the number of transactions, but also the money traded. Deals have happened, but the volume has been much, much lower than during the previous years. The previous 2-3 years were very good from the exit perspective. But this is seasonal business. That is cyclical. That it's always been, and it will come back. Now it's been relatively quiet, but guaranteed there will be a rally never seen before again one day. When exactly, no one knows, but that will come. And actually that is somewhat related to the resilience thing, because you don't sell companies. You want to be bought. But of course, for you to be bought, you need to do your part for that. But the best deals are done when the opportunity presents itself. And you never know in advance when that will happen. But you need to be ready. You need to be prepared. You need to do your part to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. And actually, I recently learned another new thing, the definition of luck. Luck happens when preparation meets opportunity. And that's a very good way to put it, because the preparation part is something you can control, or you need to do your part. Opportunity is not in your hands. The opportunity is the weather or whatever. It's an outside thing. But you need to be ready to spot the opportunity and take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. And some people call it luck. But actually, it's preparation and readiness.
That's a very good point. And I think one of the kind of correlations that I want to pull in here, we talked about raising funding rounds previously. And every time you take in a new round and you raise more money, you're kind of raising the floor of where an exit makes sense.
Sure.
So oftentimes that can be really difficult for a company. You've raised a lot of money, and then all of a sudden you realize that the exit value you need to reach is something that's very difficult to do in practice.
Well, yeah, you may have painted yourself in a corner, so to speak, that to get a happy end, it's a mission is impossible. So you would need to get such a sky-high exit that it's not realistic. It's never going to happen. And that's why before you get on that pathway to start raising a lot more money at rising valuations, think twice, because once you get on that road, there's no coming back.
Yeah.
And often it results in a dead end.
Yeah. And then drawing another correlation there is also that you mentioned that one of the things you celebrate is when is the first time that the company becomes cash flow positive, and if you are cash flow positive, then you are more in control of your destiny, because you can make decisions when you raise money or when you're looking for that good opportunity for an exit.
Well, only at that point you are the master at your own house, because as long as you depend on external backers, they are the dog, you are the tail. You work for them. In a way, you are their slave. You are at their mercy. But when you have the opportunity to be revenue funded, and it's not always the optimal one, but when you have that opportunity as an alternative, you always have the choice. Well, I may raise funding if I can prove the ROI, if I can have access to money at reasonable terms, blah, blah, blah. But I don't have to. I always have the option to be revenue funded. And that gives you time to wait for the opportunity. One reason from Warren Buffett is that build your business such that you would like to own it forever. As if you don't, you will. So you need to be able to stay in the game long enough for the right opportunity to present itself. And you never know how long it will take. So the companies who raise enough money to last for the next 12 to 18 months, and that's the time window when we have to exit, man, that's painful. Most likely it will not happen. Or if it will, the buyer will know your situation and will dictate the terms accordingly. So being resilient, being cash flow positive allows you to stay in the game as long as needed.
at the end of every episode, we have a couple of things we're going to do. So a few additional questions. We started our why we're doing this from the perspective that we don't want founders to have to say that I wish I had known that years ago. So the first question to you to conclude is, what do you know today that you wish you had known years ago?
Yeah, I knew this is coming because it was my idea to ask these questions, and I was certain that I will be fed my own dog food.
Yes.
So I thought about it. And it's actually a bloody hard question. But my answer to that is not directly related to this business. It's more of a life learning. But the fact you have money doesn't qualify you to use it wisely. And I have paid dearly for that learning, because once upon a time I was lucky enough to have not fuck you level money, but maybe excuse level money to invest. And I thought that, hey, I have money, I'm an investor. So I start investing to make even more money. Guess what? Not much of that money is left today. Had I understood that earlier, I would have acted differently. And yeah, the parallel you could draw and apply that to our context is that as a founder, the fact you may have access to funding does not necessarily qualify you for using it wisely.
Very good, very good. The second question that I do have is, what do you think could have helped you move faster on your learning curve? And now, of course, it's not a founder-related question. It's you've been doing this investing for quite some time. So
yeah, again, my idea, and now I feel the pressure, and it's another hard question. Thought about that as well, and actually for me, and this is more about personal development thing, which then probably would have some implications to this business as well. But I wish I had learned some hard lessons in life at a young age, because things seemed too easy for me for too long, which made me possibly a bit complacent and a bit cocky and all that. So if some people think I'm complacent and cocky today, man, you should have seen me 20 or 30 years ago. I think those experiences that happened later in life have changed me and have made me far more humble, which probably help in this business, because now, yeah, my ego, it doesn't get on the way. I've made many enough mistakes, all that, so I have full understanding for making mistakes, and they are actually the raw material for learning. So I have more mercy for other people and also for myself. But if I had those hard learnings of life at a young age, I would have had more time to benefit from those learnings. Now they happen so late that I'm running out of time before I have fully capitalized on those. But then there's one more question you should have asked, and I asked it myself, that why are two Finnish guys doing this thing in broken English? Dear listeners, the reason is that actually many of our potential listeners don't speak Finnish. So it is this language we speak with them as well. So we have to land with the most used language in the world, which is broken English.
Thanks, Risto, for filling that in. All right, the last question that I have for you is, what would you like to ask our next guest?
Well, I know who he is. What is the single most important thing an early stage founder should focus on?
Thank you, Risto. That's a good time to stop for today.